Welcome back to TalesBlip, and today's story is The Friend I Wished For. Hi, I'm Noah Thompson, I'm 29 years old, and I work as a freelance photographer. I spend most of my time capturing the beauty of the world, but what I'm about to tell you is a different kind of story. It's a story about the night I made a wish, one I've regretted ever since. Be careful what you wish for because sometimes, wishes come true in ways you never expect. Now, let's dive into the story. I've always been fascinated by the night sky, whether it was the twinkling stars, the crescent moon's soft glow, or the memories of my childhood spent with my mother under the stars. Back then, she would wrap me in my favorite blue blanket, and we'd sit together on the porch, gazing at the sky as she told me stories. These weren't just any stories, they were tales passed down from her mother. Even now, when I visit her, she uses the same playful voices that made me laugh when I was a kid. One evening, she told me about wishing stars. She pointed to the sky and explained that some stars aren't like the others. They watch us from the vast darkness, waiting for pure-hearted children to make their wishes. If you listen carefully, she said, you might even hear them giggling as they wait for you to share your heart's desires. That same night, I saw it, a shooting star. It streaked across the sky so quickly, but it left behind a glowing trail of light. I closed my eyes tight and made my wish. I wished for a friend. Afterward, we wrapped up our stories for the night, our laughter fading into the quiet. My mother scooped me up into her arms, making me giggle as she carried me inside. She always pretended I was her softest pillow, piling on top of me when she tucked me into bed. I'd laugh and say, "Mom, get off me. You have your own bed." She'd laugh too, kiss my forehead, and tuck me in. Whispering, "I love you," before giving me that look, the one that made me feel bad for even thinking of wiping away her kisses. I hid my smile under the blanket and whispered back, "I love you too." As usual, I was asleep before she even left the room, her soft words still echoing in my mind. I hadn't been asleep long when something woke me up. At first, I wasn't sure what it was, but then I heard it, a tapping sound on my window. Tap. 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 It wasn't just the tapping that made my stomach churn, though, it was the strange, low whispering that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. My body went cold as the final tap became a screech, like nails on a chalkboard. Despite the fear gripping me, I somehow found the courage to get out of bed. My legs trembled as I crept toward the window. The whispering grew louder, and the air felt colder than it had before. With shaking hands, I grabbed the curtains. I could see light leaking through the fabric, and my heart pounded as I held my breath. I didn't know what was out there, but I couldn't stop myself. I had to look. I pulled the curtains open, and there it was, standing outside in the moonlight, just beyond my window, was something I'd never seen before. Its skin was black as night, blending into the shadows, but the light from the moon made it glisten in an eerie way. The creature was tall, too tall, with spindly, twisted limbs that seemed to stretch out forever. But its face, if you could even call it a face, was a star. A grim, twisted star with sharp, uneven edges. The light it gave off wasn't warm like the stars my mother and I had looked at. No, this light was cold, and it filled me with dread that it had two unblinking eyes. A sharp, pointed nose, and a grotesque smile that stretched so wide it looked like it was splitting the starhead in two. Its lips were thin and cracked, revealing jagged, uneven teeth. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't. My voice was caught in my throat, and all I could do was stare. My legs gave out, and I collapsed onto the floor. The carpet, once soft, now felt like needles against my skin as I shivered in fear. The creature moved closer, its limbs bending and twisting unnaturally as it reached toward the window. Its long, black claws tapped the glass again, and the window creaked open slowly. "Come. Play with me," it whispered, its voice low and raspy, like leaves rustling in the wind. I shook my head, trying to scoot back, but my body was frozen with fear. My breath came in quick, panicked bursts as it climbed through the window, its body contorting to fit through the small opening. it stood there, towering over me, its eerie star face glowing brighter. "Don't be afraid, little one," it said, its voice softer now. "You wished for a friend, didn't you?" Tears streamed down my face as I nodded. This wasn't the friend I had wished for. This was a nightmare, not a dream. The creature crouched down, bringing its claw to my cheek to wipe away my tears. Its touch was cold, like ice, and its smile remained as wide as ever. "Friends don't make friends cry," it whispered. "We'll be together. For a long, long time." It lifted me up effortlessly and placed me back in bed, tucking me in just like my mother would. Its claw brushed through my hair, then it moved to the foot of my bed, sitting there in the darkness. "Don't worry," it said softly, "I'll always be here." I closed my eyes, praying it was just a nightmare, but deep down, I knew it wasn't. Every night after that, I felt its eyes on me as I slept. It never spoke again, but it didn't have to. Its presence was enough. Over the years, I drifted further from my mother and her comforting stories. I grew older, but the creature stayed with me, always watching, always waiting. I'd see it standing in the shadows, its twisted smile haunting me as I moved through my life. Even when I left home and started my photography career, I felt it, always there, like a shadow I could never escape. No matter where I went or what I did, it followed. I never made another wish. I didn't need to. The friend I wished for had become my constant companion, a reminder of what happens when you ask the stars for something. I never told my mother, even as the years passed and our relationship grew distant. How could I explain that the friend I wished for still watched me every night? Even now, I can feel it. Watching. Smiling. As I grew into adulthood, the presence of my friend became more invasive, more suffocating. It wasn't just during the nights anymore. I started noticing it at odd times, sometimes in the middle of a sunny afternoon. It began with small things, shadows that didn't belong, flickers in my peripheral vision. At first, I brushed them off. But deep down, I knew what was lurking in those shadows. It was watching, always watching. I remember the first time it appeared during the day. I was in the middle of a photo shoot. The sun was shining brightly, casting a warm glow over the cityscape I was trying to capture. But as I raised the camera to my eye, there it was, in the reflection of the lens. Its grotesque, star-shaped face stared back at me. That wide, unnatural smile. My hands shook, and the camera slipped from my grasp, crashing onto the pavement below. Sure. Here's a more extended and detailed version of the ending, expanding on the main character's experience with the creature over the years and diving deeper into the psychological and emotional toll it takes. Extended ending. As I grew into adulthood, the presence of my friend became more invasive, more suffocating. It wasn't just during the nights anymore. I started noticing it at odd times, sometimes in the middle of a sunny afternoon. It began with small things, shadows that didn't belong, flickers in my peripheral vision. At first, I brushed them off. But deep down, I knew what was lurking in those shadows. It was watching, always watching. I remember the first time it appeared during the day. I was in the middle of a photo shoot. The sun was shining brightly, casting a warm glow over the cityscape I was trying to capture. But as I raised the camera to my eye, there it was, in the reflection of the lens. Its grotesque, star-shaped face stared back at me. That wide, unnatural smile. My hands shook, and the camera slipped from my grasp, crashing onto the pavement below. The client asked me if I was okay, but I couldn't answer. My heart raced as I glanced around, expecting to see it standing there in broad daylight, waiting for me. But it wasn't. Not visibly, at least. Yet I knew it was there. I could feel it, the cold, eerie presence always lingering just out of sight. After that day, I became more aware of it. Sometimes, I'd feel its breath on the back of my neck while editing photos late into the night. Other times, I'd see it standing at the far end of the street as I walked home. It never moved closer, but it never left either. It was like a shadow that clung to me, a part of my life that I couldn't escape. The years went by, and I started avoiding people. How could I explain this to anyone? How could I tell my friends or my family that the wish I made as a child had cursed me with a companion I couldn't get rid of? They wouldn't believe me. Hell, I wouldn't believe me if I hadn't lived it. So, I distanced myself. I moved to a small apartment where no one could visit. I kept to myself, shutting out the world as much as I could, but even then, I wasn't alone. I'd often lie awake at night, my eyes fixed on the ceiling, feeling the weight of its gaze from the foot of my bed. It wouldn't say a word anymore. It didn't need to. The silence was worse than any words it could have spoken. The smile, that horrific smile, was always there, hovering at the edge of the darkness, reminding me of my mistake. One night, years later, I found myself sitting on the edge of my bed, staring out of the window. The stars were out, twinkling innocently in the sky, and for the first time in a long time, I felt something stir in me, an urge to wish again. But not for a friend this time. No, this time, I wished for an end. I wished for freedom, I whispered, my voice hoarse with desperation, but as soon as the words left my lips, I felt it. The cold. The unmistakable chill that came whenever the creature was near. I didn't have to look to know it was standing behind me, closer than ever before. I could hear its ragged breath, feel its icy fingers brush against my neck. The smile I couldn't see burned into my mind as it whispered. You wished for a friend. And friends don't leave. A wave of dread washed over me. I knew then that I could never escape it. This was my life now, trapped in the web of my own childhood wish. There would be no freedom, no release. It had become a part of me, a constant presence that would never let go. Days turned into months, and months into years. I continued my work as a photographer, but it felt empty. Every photo I took seemed haunted by the presence of the creature. It was as if it was mocking me, reminding me that no matter how far I tried to run, no matter how much I tried to distract myself, it was always there. See it in the photos I developed, a shadow in the corner. A glint in the reflection of a window. It was subtle, but it was there. I'd delete those photos, throw them away, but I could never shake the feeling that it was getting closer, tightening its grip on my life. And then, one night, it finally spoke again. I was lying in bed, staring up at the ceiling as usual, when I heard its voice, soft and eerie, cutting through the silence. It's been a long time, hasn't it? It whispered, its tone almost friendly. I didn't answer. What could I say? I had long since given up on fighting it, on pretending it wasn't there. I'd learned to live with its presence, even though it had cost me everything, my relationships, my peace, my life as I knew it. You're tired, it continued, its voice almost soothing now. But don't worry, I'm here. I'll always be here. Tears welled up in my eyes, and for the first time in years, I allowed myself to cry. The weight of everything, the lost years, the loneliness, the fear, finally broke me. And as the tears streamed down my face, the creature moved closer. I could feel it, standing at the foot of my bed, watching me with that same twisted smile. We're friends. Aren't we? It asked, its voice soft and mocking. I nodded, defeated. There was no point in resisting anymore. This was my life now. My friend would never leave. As I grew older, the creature grew bolder. It no longer lingered in the shadows, content to haunt me from the periphery. No, now it stood beside me, always present, always watching. It would appear in the background of my photos, a dark silhouette that only I could see. It followed me on every job, every shoot, every quiet moment of my life. Sometimes, I'd wake in the middle of the night to find it sitting at the foot of my bed, just staring at me with that grotesque, star-like face. Its smile never faltered. It never wavered. And in those moments, I realized that this was what my life had become, a never-ending nightmare with no escape. Years passed, and I became a ghost of who I once was. The vibrant, hopeful photographer who wished upon a star for a friend was long gone, replaced by a hollow shell, haunted by the creature I had unwittingly invited into my life. I stopped working. I stopped trying. I let the world move on without me. The creature, however, remained. Always there. Always waiting. In my final years, I became resigned to its presence. It no longer frightened me. It no longer even made me sad. It simply was. A part of me, like my own shadow. A reflection of the price I had paid for that single, innocent wish all those years ago. As I lay in bed one final time, feeling the weight of my years upon me, I turned to the creature. Its eyes gleamed in the darkness, its smile wide and unsettling as ever. "Will you be here when I'm gone?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. It leaned closer, its cold breath brushing against my skin as it whispered back, "Always." And so, with one last breath, I closed my eyes, knowing that even in death, my friend would never leave. This expanded ending delves into the emotional and psychological burden the main character faces over the years, as well as the ultimate realization that the creature is something that cannot be escaped. It reflects the torment and eventual resignation that comes with living with a curse disguised as a wish, deepening the theme of unintended consequences.